if I'm Red Bull watching that, I'm thinking they don't have the minerals. Not just the driver in Lando, but the team, because they made the strategic cock up, and then they're basically trying to manipulate one driver out of the way. That's not a world championship winning mentality, and that's what McLaren are aspiring to. Not next year, this year, because they can win the constructors championship this year.
The dark matter element in those players, those sports personalities, would occasionally get them a red card, right, and get them sent off. It would occasionally see Eric Cantona have to go and kung fu kick a fan in the stands because he just couldn't help himself. But that was almost the tax that you needed to pay in order to access the upper echelons of their sporting endeavour.
It's so interesting to have a conversation about Lando and then have a conversation about Max. Like, you can see where Lando is kind of like, oh, I'm just a cog and like I have to make everyone happy, whereas Max is like, no, I am the machine.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Shakedown podcast. With me as always, my friends, my brethren, my colleagues, the one they call the A-side, Shazinho, and the one they call Sub Baxty. How are we doing, chaps? It doesn't matter how you're doing because there's lots of F1ish to talk about and we need to talk about it. Shez, let me come to you first. Quick fire question. Did Lando Norris do the right thing at the Hungarian Grand Prix this weekend past? Yay or nay?
Negative.
Oh, based upon what, sir?
I think he made the wrong choices. I don't have a problem with him either being honourable and giving up the position or being really selfish and keeping the position. But what he should have done was do one of those two things at the right time. Don't give up the position when you can't fight back, and don't give up the position when actually, if you were not going to give up the position in the first place, why would you do it at that point? I just think that the thinking in his head didn't make sense. There was a bit of confusion there for him. Do I do the right thing? Do I not do the right thing? What is the right thing? And he ended up doing a halfway house that didn't help him at all.
Halfway house is never the goal, is it, Baxter? To that, so you say what?
He did the right thing, in inverted commas. Like, I agree, Shez. I think he should have kept the position. Yes, it would have been harsh on Oscar because Oscar had done all the work up until that point. But let's talk about the real issue here, and that's the god awful strategic call by McLaren. What were they thinking? Covering off Lewis Hamilton, who was 8 seconds down the road, nowhere near. He was in a different postcode, and yet McLaren are going, "Oh, we might need to cover him off." Are they thinking he's going to find a Mario Kart item box and get a gold star and start charging round into? Ridiculous by McLaren, and they almost threw away a 1-2, even though they were comfortable. Like, they had enough of a gap between Oscar and Lando where they could have easily double stacked them. They could have put Oscar in earlier. Yeah, it was a stupid call by McLaren, and I think Lando was right to sort of challenge their position and go, well, I'm the one fighting for the drivers' championship. I'm technically the number one driver here. It would benefit me to take this win, but I think in the long run, he probably did the right thing because he kept the harmony within the team just about. I mean, he left it late, but I think he has landed a psychological blow on Oscar a little bit because he's basically allowed Oscar to win, but basically he can now say this in the back of Oscar's head: "You won because of me."
Oh, this is a bit techie. This it's a bit techie.
He was pulling away in that last stint.
Props, but fair play. But Oscar had spent he'd done what he needed to do, right? He'd spent 90% of the Grand Prix just in control. Sebastian Vettel settings circa 2010 to 2013. Like, he was bossing it. So I don't know why. I agree with Shez. I don't know why they, and you, Baxley, to be fair, I don't know why they didn't just pit bloody Oscar first. He's the guy with the whip hand. He surely should be making the decisions. Let me pitch another question at you this way, though. Did we learn something about Lando Norris that potentially he doesn't necessarily have the ruthless mettle requisite to winning himself a championship that so characterised those who have come before him in Schumacher and Senna and Prost even, Chez?
Yeah, I think it's solidified something that was there already, right? That's that slight feeling that he would always try and do something that would please the most amount of people rather than do
Wow.
the thing that helps him out. Like, you have to kind of think about this in terms of, if you had like Max or Lewis or Schumacher or Senna in that position, at any point would they have gone, I'm giving up that position? Or Vettel, for example. Vettel did this twice, multi 2021, well, not 2021, multi 21, or in Singapore 2019. Remember when he got undercut ahead of Charles? Like, was there at any point that he was going to go, oh yeah, I'll give that position back to Charles because like he was doing all the work beforehand? No, no chance. And you can't. I more and more get the feeling with Lando that he needs to be loved. Like, he needs people to like him in his team. And that came out for me on Sunday. There was just a feeling that he was having this inner turmoil in his head when there shouldn't have been any.
Oof, mate. Maxty, chime in on this, please, because it's a bit techie.
I disagree.
Go on,
Sorry,
Baxley.
I disagree with Shez a little bit there. I think Lando wanted to keep that position, but I think, and let's not forget, like the messaging he was getting from Will Joseph was tantamount to emotional blackmail. Like, I mean, it was a very difficult situation, I think, for him to kind of acknowledge, because he should have gone on and won that race. He should have. And because McLaren screwed up. And I think McLaren could have just easily said, actually, Oscar, we're really sorry, but Lando's the number one driver and he's chasing the championship. If I'm Red Bull watching that, okay, Red Bull had a shocker of a weekend. I'm sure we'll get onto it. But if I'm Red Bull watching that, I'm thinking, they don't have the minerals. Not just the driver in Lando, but the team, because they made the strategic cock up, and then they're basically trying to manipulate one driver out of the way. That's not a world championship winning mentality,
Mm.
and that's what McLaren are aspiring to. Not next year, this year, because they can win the constructors championship this year. They've got to fix up. Like Andrea Stella, I think, was doing his best Ferrari crisis management training in action after the race. But to have messages like that broadcast, um, to the world for the world to hear is never a good look.
Actually, I agree with that to a certain extent. But if you look back at like what the radio messaging was to Seb in Sepang that year, like there was a lot of, remember Christian Horner coming on the radio saying, "Come on, Seb, come on, just do the right thing, mate. Come
Yeah,
on."
yeah,
Like they were doing the same thing to him. So I feel like you have to have some faith that your driver is going to be susceptible to that, like he's going to listen to that kind of emotional blackmail. Whereas like certain drivers, you could say whatever you want to them, but
yeah.
their inner clock is just saying, I
So
literally don't care what you're saying, I'm just going to win this race.
two very different situations, aren't they? Because Seb was passing Mark Webber, wasn't he, to get that win in Sepang?
Yeah,
And of
he
course,
was.
that comes with risk because they could have collided and lost a 1-2, which is, I think, that's what they were more concerned about. Whereas this was Lando pulling away from Oscar. And he did do he did the Lewis line where he said, well, he needs to get closer. Yeah, he did that. He said that, well,
All excuses, right? Yeah,
he's
there's
not
all
close. He's not close
it's
enough. Lewis did that to Rosberg, of course. If he
but
wants to
these
go past, he's got to get closer.
but these are all arguments for why I think there is that inner turmoil going on, right? He's not sort of like, if he was just gonna go ahead and win the race, right? He would have just done what he had done at the start. When Will Joseph has to ask if he's still there and do the radio check,
Mm.
like Lando had to do the, yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Like, he could have just not answered, and
No, but
that
he
that
was. Yeah, but that's because he was arguing with the team. Like he
but why
wanted to
argue?
take that win.
Yeah,
Well,
why
because
argue
he's
if
got the engineer in his ear every lap, going, Lando.
he's got he's got the throttle pedal under his right foot.
Exactly. I mean, I agree with you. He should have kept the win, but he did the right thing, because it could be that if things do get tight, Oscar might be more inclined to help him going
Yeah.
forward. But I mean, I hope that this is a one-off, not just for Lando, but for McLaren as well. And I think Lando, I mean, he's lost a lot of wins already this year that he could have had 3, 4, maybe even 5. Um, he's what 70 odd points behind Max, and Max was having a shocker behind him, so he needed to take advantage. And I think McLaren should have seen the height. Yeah, yeah, great, Oscar's first win, but it's been completely overshadowed by all of this.
Yeah, it was a pretty dour podium, wasn't it, for Oscar?
A
Yeah.
shame, and that is a shame.
Mm.
Finally, to put a bookend on this, I personally, the thing that moved me most was Lando and his communication with Lewis in the cool down room. There's something about that just had me like, who does this chap think he's talking to? If there was a time to boss up and stand 10 toes down on anything, it was when you were in the car, Lando, not when you've got out and now you want to vent your frustration at Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson, Hamilton, who had absolutely nothing to do with this circumstance. And that made me think whether Lando's trying to wear, per Chez's assertion earlier, whether Lando's still trying to wear too many caps, please too many different stakeholders who have conflicting demands. True or false, Chez?
Yeah, I think that's a problem. That was, yeah, he came across a bit petulant, didn't it? And it's not the first time. He's come out with something like that when he's had a bad race. He did the same thing in Portugal 2020 after Lewis won his 92nd. There is a little bit of it should have been me, but you kind of feel like, well, Lando, you had it in your power for it to have been you, and if you're frustrated afterwards, it's not. Yeah, fine. Lewis was the first person in front of him in the green room, so yeah, fair enough. But that's how it came across. It just came across as I didn't get what I want. I'm just having to go at you because you're the first person there.
Didn't like it. Absolutely did not like it at all. And it's the heat of battle, and I get it. And there's a certain, maybe I need to give Lando a little bit of grace. Like, he's just lost the Grand Prix, right? Giving away another 7 points, which ultimately could cost him the championship. All of the aforementioned, he's wrestling within real time. But yeah, and still, Lewis isn't the person at whom you need to be pointing your laser, chap. And I just didn't appreciate it. Should we talk about Maximilian Verstappen? Because I think he had a very interesting race, did he not? How do you characterise Max's showing, Baxty?
It was his worst race since Saudi Arabia 2021. Like, honestly, it was appalling. You're saying like, oh, I got forced off. I had every right to take the position, even though you are not allowed to pass other cars off the track. And then saying, oh, so we can just press people off. It's like, so you've made an entire career about that, and there's been many videos with the receipts of that in the last few days. That was silly by Max, but that's racing driver visor down. So I kind of cut him a bit of slack there. What was not acceptable to me was the way that he was talking to GP and talking to the team and allowing his frustrations to get the better of him. That crash he had with Lewis, I could see it coming about 10 laps before it actually happened, because it was just so obvious that he was not in the right frame of mind to be, you killer moves, overtakes. He was making uncharacteristic mistakes. Now, some of that may be the car. That's the nature of Formula One. But to talk like that to your race engineer who you've won 3 Grand Prix with. I mean, you think of the greats. Yes, everyone has their moments behind the wheel of a Formula One car. Like Lewis has snapped, Seb has snapped, Senna's snapped, Schumacher snapped, but never to that extent. The only driver who I can think that's come close to that is Fernando.
True.
And but it was just, I found it very unedifying, particularly from somebody who is releasing a documentary to try and boost his public acclaim in a very love me exercise. Everyone, he wants to be loved, the all loved, the Lewis like figure, but that's not going to help you, chap. It's ridiculous. And I think Red Bull, have every right to be annoyed, but at the same time, they created the monster, so they have to deal with the consequences.
Oh, Chez, let me pitch the question at you this way. They used to say a lot about Wayne Rooney, like, and even Eric Cantona going back in the day for the football and soccer fans out there, that they had this, that the dark matter element in those players, those sports personalities, would occasionally get them a red card, right, and get them sent off. It would occasionally see Eric Cantona have to go and kung fu kick a fan in the stands because he just couldn't help himself. But that was almost the tax that you needed to pay in order to access the upper echelons of their sporting endeavour. Is there a parallel to be drawn between a Rooney and an Eric Cantona and a Max Verstappen? Do you get an Austrian Grand Prix qualifying lap that was a lap from the gods, if you're to believe Jolyon Palmer and Anthony Davidson, without that edge that will have him effing and blinding at a GP? Can you separate those two entities? Get one without the other, Shez?
I think with Max, no, because it was the same with Senna, wasn't it? And I think Senna specifically, because there's that inner belief, and this is why it's in stark contrast to Lando. It's so interesting to have a conversation about Lando and then have a conversation about Max, because their self-belief and where they feel they fit into the machine is so different. Like you can see where Lando is kind of like, oh, I'm just a cog and like I have to make everyone happy, whereas Max is like, no, I am the machine, right? Like he's actively like that radio exchange that he had with GP. The most interesting one for me was the one where he said, where GP says, "Oh, that was a hell of an introduction to those tires," and he comes on. He's like, "Oh, you guys have messed up the strategy. You guys have messed up the car. F this, F that. I'm getting you through this." And I think that radio message was a microcosm of how he feels about the team right now. And it's and to your point, yes, he will take things to the nth level, because in his head, and maybe it's a reality to some extent, this team is winning races and getting the points that they are because of him, not because of the car, not because of the engineers. This isn't a team sport anymore. This is about me, and I am doing all this stuff, so I have the right to go ahead and be angry over the radio and push people off. And who are you, the team? Who are you to tell me that you can't that you're not going to talk to the stewards about Lewis moving in the braking zone or giving back that position, or I was behind at the apex when I was past Lewis? No. I'm telling you, this is what happened. You should go and tell the stewards and fight my case for me. And I can't hate that. Genuinely, I can't hate that. I think that level of self-belief drives him to those performances. But yeah, fine, this is the payback you get. Do I love hearing that on the radio? Yeah, of course I do. Like it's huge fun to hear it. And it gives us this stuff to talk about, but it's part and parcel of Max Verstappen. I wouldn't have it any other way.
So I'll be honest, as much as I was eulogised and wax lyrical about some of Max's exploits on track, I wasn't a massive... I understand the why and the how, but that doesn't mean that I needed to necessarily be a fan of the mode of communication and the tone and some of the verbiage. That if not because were I GP as a human being, I'm just imagining my boss speaking to me like that. Like we would never talk to each other ever again in life. Like inside or outside. If I had to leave my job, then I would have to leave my job and find another one.